Karen mocked my sister's prenatal belt. I made her fake HOA Crumble in court. Karen pointed at my sister's belly, laughed, and said, "Is that a back brace? Or are you faking a disability now?" She didn't know who I was yet. Didn't know I'd spent 17 years delivering babies, fighting for maternal health care access, testifying before Congress on postpartum discrimination. Didn't know I was the youngest division head of OB services in the state of Georgia. Didn't know she was laughing at a woman wearing a medically prescribed prenatal support belt because her pelvis was separating under the weight of carrying twins. She thought she was just mocking another rule breaker. She didn't know this time. The rules would fight back. My name is Preston Ellis. I'm 39, Atlanta-born, and I've spent the better part of my adult life inside hospitals. But this story didn't start in a delivery room. It started in a cul-de-sac in Brook Hollow Trails, a gated suburban development that looked clean, quiet, and welcoming. We moved there to help my sister. Ray had lost her husband in a motorcycle accident 6 months into her pregnancy. Twins, high risk. One of them breech. She needed family close, and I just accepted the department head position at St. Vincent's Hospital, 20 minutes away. So I bought the house next door. Quiet block, modest yard, a place we thought we could recover. That illusion didn't last a week. The first time I met Karen, she walked across our lawn without knocking. She stood on Ray's porch, handed her a welcome packet, and started criticizing her window shades. "They don't meet HOA pallet guidelines. You'll need to change them." She didn't smile, just handed over a list with items like no food-related decorations, no visible medical accessories, and no sitting on porches during non-social hours. Ray, 8 months pregnant and already bracing against contractions, blinked in disbelief. I came over and asked, "Is there a number I can call for clarification?" Karen looked me up and down. "I am the number. I run the HOA." She was lying, but we didn't know that yet. The prenatal support belt came 2 weeks later, prescribed after Ray collapsed from pelvic instability during a grocery trip. She wore it under her shirt when she could, but sometimes, especially in the Georgia heat, she needed to adjust it outside. Karen saw her once, then again, and then she showed up with a camera. "You're out here faking injuries. You know this is a visual community, right?" Ray tried to walk away. Karen blocked her path. "You think I'm stupid? That's not medical. That's attention-seeking." Then she laughed, loud, cruel, and Ray cried. She sank onto the front steps and sobbed, and Karen filmed it. I pulled into the driveway 5 minutes later, saw Ray hunched over, saw Karen still holding her phone. "What the hell is going on here?" Karen turned. Her voice was sharp. "She's violating HOA decency guidelines, pretending to be disabled, sitting around like she's got a problem." I stepped between them. "You're talking about a woman recovering from trauma, carrying twins, with a prenatal complication I've treated 100 times. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, so you're the latest boyfriend?" "No, I said. "I'm her brother, and I'm the chief of obstetric services at St. Vincent's." Karen's smirk twitched. I leaned closer, calm, controlled. "If you ever film my sister crying again, you'll be explaining yourself to a courtroom instead of a neighborhood." Karen's lip curled. "Then I guess I'll see you there." The next day, Ray got a printed citation in her mailbox. Violation 3.6.4, public presentation of medical equipment without approval penalty. $200 fine and HOA disciplinary review. I knew then this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Karen had built an empire of lies, and it was time I tore it down. The fake citation was typed in all caps. The font Times New Roman. The seal at the top, a Google image of a gavel and eagle with the words Brook Hollow HOA Compliance Board sloppily photoshopped underneath. I read it once, then again. I wasn't just angry, I was professionally insulted. Because in my world, there's a standard for documentation. Every diagnosis, every chart, every prescription follows strict legal protocol. What Karen handed us wasn't a citation, it was a prop, a performance. But the damage was real. Ray spent the rest of the day in bed, refusing to go outside. She didn't want to give Karen more footage. And that's when I knew this wasn't about rules. This was about shame. Karen's power came from humiliating people until they retreated. But Ray had me now, and I don't retreat. That evening, I started investigating. Brook Hollow trails looked polished on the surface, but the paperwork told a different story. The HOA had officially disbanded 4 years prior after a legal dispute over embezzlement and mismanaged maintenance funds. The last recorded president, not Karen, there was no board, no elected officials, no active bylaws. The neighborhood was operating under county code only. So how did Karen get away with issuing fines? Simple. She created her own version of the HOA Brook Hollow Civic Compliance Unit, registered as a private community oversight group with a P.O. box and a printer. She drafted her own bylaws, even reinstated rules from the former HOA by quoting outdated PDFs. She wore a blue vest with enforcement chairwoman stitched across the back. Nobody voted her in. She just started acting like she ran things. And for years, no one challenged her because she did it quietly, methodically. She targeted the vulnerable. I needed evidence, real evidence. So I called on someone who owed me a favor, Jillian Marks, a housing attorney I'd helped with her high-risk pregnancy 2 years ago. She pulled the public records for Brook Hollow, and the first bomb dropped. Karen Jury had filed more than 170 citations in the past 2 years. Over $27,000 in fines had been paid into an account tied to her private entity. $0 had been used for community improvements. It was fraud, not petty annoyance, not Karen being Karen, criminal, coordinated fraud. I printed it all out and labeled it Exhibit A. Next, I started knocking on doors. I didn't introduce myself as a doctor, just as Ray's brother. I met an elderly couple who'd paid $600 in HOA dues they thought were required. A single mother who'd been cited for nuisance laundry line exposure. A veteran who had been fined for flag overrepresentation because he hung an American flag in his window. Each person felt the same emotion, embarrassed. They hadn't fought back because they thought they were the only ones. Karen's rule thrived on silence, on isolation. But what she didn't know, Ray wasn't the only person she'd filmed crying. One neighbor, Maribel, showed me a video from her doorbell cam. It was Karen, standing on her porch with 2 compliance officers, neighbors she'd coerced into following her. She handed Maribel a citation and said, "If you don't stop letting your kids chalk the sidewalk, we'll escalate this to county." Maribel had looked terrified, but it was a bluff. The county had never received a single report from Karen's group. She'd been faking it all. I created a Dropbox folder, named it Operation False Authority. Inside, I stored PDFs of Karen's fake citations, screenshots of her payment receipts, her fake bylaws and shell company registration, video footage of her threatening Ray and Maribel, a spreadsheet logging all known victims. And then I made calls to the County Housing Board, to Consumer Fraud Protection, to Channel 5 News. The spark was lit. The next morning, Karen retaliated. A new letter showed up taped to Ray's porch railing. "You are now under formal disciplinary review by the Brook Hollow Civic Compliance Unit. Due to repeated visual violations and hostile behavior, your household is subject to HOA expulsion protocol. You have 72 hours to vacate or appeal at the community board's discretion." That was it. She'd crossed a line. I drove straight to the county clerk's office and filed a formal fraud report with attached evidence. Then I filed a harassment complaint with a sworn affidavit from Ray's OB. Finally, I submitted all the documents to Jillian, our housing attorney, who confirmed she could file a civil suit against Karen for impersonating legal authority and causing psychological harm. 2 days later, I stood outside Ray's porch with a printed statement in hand. A local reporter stood beside me. Neighbors began to gather. Karen watched from across the street, arms folded, pretending not to look. I cleared my throat and spoke to the residents of Brook Hollow Trails. You've been deceived. The citations, fines, and threats issued under the so-called Brook Hollow Civic Compliance Unit are not legally valid. The HOA is inactive. You owe nothing. You never did. and those of you who paid have been victims of a coordinated fraud. My name is Dr. Preston Ellis. I am filing formal charges today, and I encourage you to join me. Gasps, murmurs. Karen stepped forward. You're blowing this out of proportion. I looked her in the eye. No, you shrank this community down to your control. I'm restoring it to its rightful size. That night, Ray stood on the porch for the first time in days. No belt, no fear, and for the first time, Karen wasn't filming. Because the camera had turned on her, Karen always believed her threats would hold. That the words compliance, citation, and violation written in bold font could keep people silent. But she hadn't prepared for what would happen when her victims spoke back together. And when the backlash came, it didn't come quietly. The first wave hit the next morning. Channel 5 News aired the footage from Ray's confrontation. It led the 600 segment, Fake HOA President Shames Pregnant Widow Over Medical Equipment. The clip showed Ray, tears streaming, whispering, "Please stop filming me," as Karen chuckled behind the camera. Phone still rolling. My quote aired right after my sister didn't need a citation, she needed care. This isn't about neighborhood rules. It's about cruelty wearing a name tag. The story spread fast. By noon, hashtags were trending locally. Ansha, fake HOA Karen, Gasha, belt not a breach, Bashu, support not surveillance, and the real flood began. The inbox of the Brook Hollow Neighborhood Forum filled with replies. Stories poured in. Karen told my wheelchair-bound mother that her chair violated visual continuity. She made my daughter cry because her backpack was too bright. I thought I was alone. I didn't know she did this to others. Each comment struck like a hammer against Karen's paper throne. That same afternoon, I got a call from the county inspector. "Mr. Ellis, we've reviewed your complaint and evidence. Our office will issue a cease and desist against Ms. Jury's entity by the end of the week. We're also launching a formal investigation." I thanked them, then forwarded the email to every neighbor who had submitted testimony. By sunset, there were over 50 confirmed residents signed onto a civil fraud suit. Karen's fake HOA wasn't just cracking, it was imploding, but Karen wasn't done. People like her never walk away from power, they have to be dragged. That night, a new flyer appeared on our porch, "Fake doctor, fake news. Don't believe the lies of outsiders trying to destabilize our neighborhood. The Civic Guild stands strong. We do not answer to internet mobs." She taped one to every mailbox in our row. The next morning, half of them were ripped down. The other half had Sharpie messages added, "You answer to us. Ray deserves better. Your HOA is fake. Our compassion isn't." Then came the town meeting. It wasn't scheduled by Karen. It was called by us Brook Hollow Voices, the newly formed legal coalition of residents. We hosted it in the community clubhouse with folding chairs, lemonade, and truth. Ray came too, belly full, chin high. I stood at the front with Jillian, our attorney. She opened the meeting with a presentation, slides of Karen's forged citations, bank statements, shell company filings, video clips, real-time court documents, and then the mic passed to me. I've spent my life delivering babies, advocating for women's health, and protecting people at their most vulnerable. But I've never seen a system this manipulative, this casually cruel, in a suburban setting. Karen took the language of order and weaponized it. She didn't care about property lines, she cared about power. A hush fell over the room. Then Ray stood up. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't need one. "I was ashamed of my belt," she said, "because of her, but that belt helped me stand, walk, sleep. It was never for show. I wore it so my babies could grow safely," and she laughed at it. Ray's voice cracked, "And I'll never forgive myself for letting her make me feel small." Silence, then applause. Long, rising, furious applause. Karen showed up halfway through the meeting. She stood in the doorway, lips tight, arms folded. "Are we seriously putting personal feelings over community order?" she asked. Jillian stepped forward. Karen Drury, we have served you with formal notice of intent to sue. Your entity has been legally challenged and named in a coordinated fraud complaint. Karen laughed. You people are pathetic, but no one laughed with her. Even the neighbors who once sided with her sat stone-faced. Karen looked around and realized what she'd lost. Not a lawsuit, a following. 2 days later, the county delivered the cease and desist in person. Ray filmed it. The video showed a uniformed officer walking up to Karen's door, handing her the envelope, and calmly saying, "You are no longer authorized to represent any community body within the boundaries of Brook Hollow Trails. Any further citations, fines, or disciplinary notices issued by you will be considered harassment and subject to prosecution." Karen slammed the door. Meanwhile, the civil suit moved forward. 23 neighbors, one housing attorney, a paper trail longer than most federal cases. The charges: fraudulent impersonation of a legal body, emotional harassment, coercion via false legal threats, misuse of private funds under deceptive pretenses. Total claim $450,000 in damages. At home, Ray was stronger. She started sitting on the porch again without hiding her belt. She walked slower but steadier. She even laughed once when someone from down the block brought her a potted plant for the brave lady on the news. That plant replaced the one Karen shattered, and it bloomed. The night before Karen's hearing, I sat beside Ray. "Are you scared?" I asked. "No," she said. She wanted the whole world to see me break. She turned to me, tears welling. And now the whole world saw me stand back up. Karen Drury wore the same smug confidence to her hearing that she used to wear on our sidewalk, arms crossed, lips thin, eyes darting as if she were still in control. But this wasn't her cul-de-sac. This was court. And this time, the law was real. The courtroom was packed. Channel 5 News had sent a camera crew. Neighbors filled the gallery. Even the judge raised an eyebrow as the list of plaintiffs was read aloud, 23 in total. Ray sat in the second row, hands resting on her swollen belly, prenatal belt proudly visible. She wore a navy dress and flat shoes, looking like someone who had fought tooth and nail to reclaim her dignity. I sat beside her, not as a doctor, not as a leader, as a brother. The case began with the basics: Karen's shell entity, the forged citations, the illegal fines, the fabricated bylaws, the use of HOA-related threats to extract payments and silence dissent. Jillian, our attorney, was sharp, methodical, and merciless. She introduced a folder labeled "Perceived Violations versus Real Laws." Slide after slide showed citations like failure to maintain approved color scheme for porch furniture, unauthorized use of abdominal support device, repeated low-energy behavior in common space. The courtroom laughed nervously at that last one. The judge did not. Then came the testimony. Rosa, 72, tearfully explained how Karen accused her of aggressive gardening and threatened to report her to elder care services if she didn't trim her vines. Maribel played doorbell footage of Karen shouting at her son for riding his tricycle outside of regulation lanes. Terrence described the day Karen told him his army flag was too political. Each story was absurd on its own, but together they formed a pattern, a mosaic of targeted cruelty under the guise of governance. Then it was Ray's turn. She took the stand slowly, the courtroom silent. She adjusted her prenatal belt once, deliberately, and began, "I didn't ask for special treatment. I just asked to be left alone." Her voice wavered, but her posture didn't. She told me I was faking, that my pain was performance, that I was bringing visual disorder to the neighborhood. She paused. "I've delivered almost to term, and I can tell you I didn't fake a single second of this." The room stirred. "I wore this belt so my children could grow safely inside me." And she laughed at it. Ray wiped a tear, then added, "But I'm the one laughing now, because it's still wrapped around me, and she's the one answering for it." Karen's defense. She misunderstood the nature of community enforcement. She claimed she filled a vacuum of leadership, that her actions restored order. The judge interrupted her closing argument. "Ms. Drury," she said, Your leadership was self-appointed. Your citations were illegal. Your threats were coercive. And your enforcement was nothing but intimidation wrapped in stationery. Karen stared, stunned. The judge continued, "This court finds your actions to be fraudulent, malicious, and harmful. You didn't serve your community, you extorted it. The verdict guilty on all counts of civil fraud and harassment. Full restitution ordered $440,000 in damages. Her assets were frozen. Her house was flagged for sale to satisfy the claims. A permanent injunction barred her from any future HOA or civic role, and she was required to issue a formal apology to every named plaintiff on camera." 2 days later, the video was filmed. A single camera, no retakes. Karen sat stiffly behind a table and read her statement. "To the residents of Brook Hollow Trails, I acknowledge that I acted without authority, used fear as leverage, and caused harm. I mocked someone for wearing a medical device without understanding her pain. I confused control with leadership. I'm sorry." Ray watched the clip on her phone, then locked the screen. "That's not an apology," she said. "That's a receipt. But we weren't looking for remorse. We were looking for release. And we got it." The next weekend, Brook Hollow threw a block party, not the kind with rules and flags, but with food, music, sidewalk chalk, and mismatched chairs. Neighbors brought dishes, kids played on the street, and someone even brought cupcakes for Ray, labeled, "For the realest belt wearer we know." Karen's house sat empty across the street, her legacy gone, replaced by laughter, music, and belonging. We turned her empire of fear into something stronger, not an HOA, a community, the kind that doesn't need a clipboard to tell people how to treat each other. Ray went into labor the following week. Her delivery was difficult, twins often are, but she did it. She pulled through. 2 beautiful girls, Maya and Elise. The nurses at the hospital smiled when they saw the embroidered wraps Ray used for her recovery. "Same style as the prenatal belt?" one of them asked. "Is that the one?" Ray grinned. "Oh, honey, this belt started a movement." 3 weeks after Ray gave birth, the neighborhood looked different. Not because the sidewalks were repaved or the signs repainted. No, something more subtle had shifted. People had started talking to each other again. Where fear once ruled, community now grew. And not the polished kind Karen tried to enforce. This was the messy, beautiful, human kind. One of the first things we did was tear down the compliance bulletin board Karen had nailed to the clubhouse wall, the one where she used to post photos of violators, Ray's belt among them. In its place, we put up a community care wall. Neighbors pinned flyers for free babysitting, posted meal trains for new parents, left notes like, "Tom's son has surgery next week, let's bring dinner." Maria's car broke down. Who's got a ride? It wasn't organized by hierarchy. It was driven by heart. Karen moved out quietly, escorted by a moving company and a court-appointed officer. She didn't wave goodbye. Nobody asked her to. Her house was bought 2 weeks later by a teacher and his husband, 2 kind men who'd read about Brook Hollow's transformation online and said, "This feels like the right place now." Funny how quickly a reputation can change. Ray recovered slowly. Her C-section scar was still tender, her schedule upside down from feeding twins. But something about her was lighter. "I used to be scared to leave the house," she told me one afternoon, bouncing Maya on her shoulder. "Now I take them on walks just to show them where strength comes from." She paused. "And if anyone ever mocks their mother's belt again, they'll get a crash course in consequence." I smiled. Spoken like a woman who rebuilt a street by surviving it. A few weeks later, the county held a forum on HOA accountability and transparency. And guess who they asked to be keynote speaker? Not me, Ray. She stood at the podium in front of over 300 officials, reporters, and housing experts. With Elise sleeping against her chest, she told her story, not just about Karen, not just the belt, but about how quickly power can be faked when no one questions it. How many of us are trained to stay quiet because we think rules are real just because they're printed, she asked. And then she said this, "My belt wasn't a violation. It was a lifeline. And my crying wasn't weakness, it was the sound of my body fighting for life. That woman didn't break me, but she reminded me that silence protects the wrong people. So I'm not quiet anymore. The room stood to its feet, and I cried like a child. Ray was later invited to join the State Council on Community Equity and Health, helping develop standards for accessibility rights within HOAs and civic bodies. Her name now sat beside mine on the speakers list, and I've never been prouder. Not because of the court victory, not because of the money, not even because we forced Karen out, but because we proved that shame can't win when truth walks beside it. Months passed. Ray's twins grew fast. The neighborhood's laughter returned, and one day while Ray and I were watching the girls nap on a picnic blanket under the old oak tree near the clubhouse, she looked over and said, "You know what the wildest part is?" I raised an eyebrow. She mocked me for wearing a belt, and now that belt is sitting in a glass case at the council office as part of a community justice exhibit. We both laughed. "That belt went to war," she added, "and it won. The HOA no longer exists officially or otherwise. In its place stands the Brook Hollow Neighbor Network, a voluntary, transparent, inclusive coalition, not based on punishment, based on care. The bylaws simple. No anonymous complaints, no surveillance without consent, no fine, only conversations." And at the top of the monthly newsletter is this quote, "Ray's favorite: kindness is not weakness, compliance is not virtue, and silence is never the cure." Karen's name became a cautionary tale, not for being loud, but for using rules as weapons instead of tools. And as for the rest of us, we became a story too. Not of victims, but of people who remembered what it means to be neighbors. Have you ever witnessed someone misuse authority in your community? Have you seen silence protect the wrong side? Let us know. Share your story, your thoughts, your stance. Because justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins in the quiet, everyday choices we make to defend dignity. What would you have done on that sidewalk?